Welcome to Floyd Street's Finest. He is Phil Big from ESPN Louisville. I am Jack Grossman. Thanks for tuning in. Cards blast Wake Forest, 10th win in a row. Something like the fifth, sixth longest winning streak in the country now. Louisville absolutely scorching hot. Again, this is Floyd Street's Finest, talking Louisville basketball on the Field 68 Media Network. You can find us on Twitter. I'm at Jack Grossman97. He's Phil __Baker. One of these days, Phil. One of these days.
Elon's new Twitter. I don't know what's acceptable to what's not. Maybe everybody makes fun of me because I tried to get on Blue Sky, and then I was like, "Oh, I'm on there," and then I haven't used it at all. But even somebody beat me to the double underscore, or they don't even use underscores. It's like hyphens on there. So it's like I give up. Greer, who's out of sports media now, congratulations to him. He got a job with the NWSL team up in New York. He told me there was a trick for that, and I've yet to get that trick learned from him, how to get the underscore back from the guy who hasn't tweeted since 2008. So I'm not bitter about it or anything, but nonetheless, it's good to see your beautiful fit in a new spot. You're looking
yes, good. Yes. I got to figure out the sound acoustics a little bit still, but which is important for a podcast. But yeah, no, love the new spot. Great location down here in Atlanta. I'm going to be showing it off to my dad, my brother, and a bunch of friends this weekend with Louisville coming in to play Georgia Tech. So great time for Jack Grossman, but. As I arrogantly say myself in third person, I'm on Blue Sky, by the way, at Jack Grossman. It's very much just me copy and pasting what I put on Twitter because I'm like, I don't really get into the weeds of all of it, but I'm like,
I know it's like I guess I want to have it just in case, but it's like I haven't used it at all. Actually, I had to reinstall it the other day because somebody was telling me that's how much I use it, because they were like, you got to get on there. And I was like, I haven't even used it, and it's already been uninstalled from my phone off there. So nobody cares about the Blue Sky stuff.
You'll appreciate this, Phil. They had these starter pack things, and for whatever reason, I got on one of the college basketball ones.
Of course.
So yeah, but like it's like Matt Norlanders, who has no idea who I am for sure. and so I start getting followed by like the Houston basketball Blue Sky account and all this.
That's perfect.
I'm like,
you need to do the stuff. I think Rutherford did it, where he just like sent stuff to random SIDs to get like random like basketball trinkets. Like you need to do that just to build up your things. Like, hey, I'll put you on my podcast to all the hundreds and thousands of people that are watching this, and just say, hey, I'm trying to build up my backdrop. Can you send me a bobblehead or a towel from a promotion you had? Just be shameless about it. It would be kind of tedious, but it'll build up your backdrop.
I'll say the bobbleheads did make it over in the movie.
God, he looks like a freaking vampire. They made Rick Pitino look like a vampire.
Just to complete the brand.
Okay.
One too. Yep.
You need a Mark Pope one. Strebel got a signed Mark Pope thing that has been almost vandalized on our set at ESPN Louisville Plus. So maybe you'll be getting a headshot glossy of him as well here in the coming months.
Oh, that's so perfect. That's so perfect. Is it right next to the Scott Satterfield signed bourbon bottle?
No, I think they opened that and drank it after he left for Cincinnati.
I can tell you that's what happened because I was one of the people that drank it with that.
Okay. I was making sure of that.
Oh, those were great times, but
simpler times.
Yeah, but let's go and get into it. Louisville absolutely blast Wake Forest. I want to talk a little bit about a Calipari angle with him going back to Lexington as well before we get on out of here. But Louisville comes in. I would argue it was their biggest test for the rest of the season, as other than just can you avoid losing to crappy teams, which is really what it's going to come down to now the last month plus of the year. But Wake Forest comes in. They're playing well. They had just fallen to Duke, but really competitive game, had the Blue Devils on the ropes there. Hunter Salas, absolute star. Efton Reed, really, really good player. Ty-Laur Johnson, old friend. I'm disappointed Louisville didn't have some type of tights promotion with Ty-Laur coming back.
What they lacked in it, they had a family member or colleague of the Ty-Laur Johnson a fan group that was rocking something that we can dive into in a bit.
No.
You didn't see this on Twitter? Oh my goodness.
I did not see this on Twitter.
I think Rutherford retweeted it. I'm not 100% sure, but basically there was a guy checks over stripes, and it was something along the lines, because they don't forget the tights. And it was a massive shirt. I'm going to send it to you here in a second if I could find it. And then he was giving L's down Ty-Laur Johnson as he was leaving. That was circulating on there. So
man.
I can't believe you missed this.
Hey, look, full disclosure, I worked Tuesday night.
Oh, and you
So I
had the
was,
double dip at the Louisville and Wake,
yeah.
and then the Kentucky Tennessee game too. That's tough.
Yeah, so like I had to go back and watch the Louisville game on Wednesday to get an actual sense other than just having it, muted on one of the TVs at work while, working
Right.
without giving any other details on that. So no, I was not very active on Twitter Tuesday night. So that's why I didn't see it. But oh, that's so
I'm
that
circulating for it, so I'll
yeah.
send it to you before this
Yeah.
podcast is over.
Oh, it's all good. We don't need to take away from the actual podcast here. Please send it to me though afterwards because I do need to see this. But Louisville comes out. I thought their ball pressure was incredible early on in the game. They first 4 turnovers by the first media timeout. It really set the tone to where Wake Forest couldn't get in their offense. They did, because I was on with Strebel earlier in the week on ESPN 680. I'll give him a free plug. 3 to 6 p.m. there. But I was expecting Louisville to really have Chucky on Ty-Laur Johnson for the majority of the game because I felt like that was the only guy that could kind of stay in front of him with how quick he is. But the flip side of that is Hunter Salas is the absolute star for Wake Forest. So I thought kind of maybe Edwards would be the guy to try to bother him with his length a little bit. We saw that some throughout the game, but Louisville started Hadley or Edwards on Johnson, Hepburn on Salas, and I'll admit it, I was proved wrong. Wrong. They were able to still stay in front of Ty-Laur, who, as Louisville fans know from his time with the Cards last year, incredibly quick guard, can get into the lane, kind of that classic New York style of game. They did a really good job staying in front of him. Chucky did a really good job on Salas. And again, the turnovers, the ball pressure just completely disrupted Wake Forest offense early in the game to where then once Louisville started hitting shots midway through the first half, things just escalated quickly. I think is the best way of putting it for how quickly that thing turned into a rout.
Yeah, I mean, that was kind of the takeaway we filled in for Bobby V yesterday and just reacting to everything that was out there. And it's like, I'm of the belief, and I'm trying to be really present with this season, right? Because obviously, with what's transpired in the last couple of years, man, guys like Chucky Hepburn do not grow on trees. Like they
No.
just don't. Like defensively, I think it's a sure in for first team all ACC. I know there was a debate where it wasn't out there and Oglesby kind of clapped back on that a little bit, but man, and then like the elite shooting from Rain Smith, and make no mistake about it, Wake Forest was smothering him at the beginning of that game, and the shots weren't initially falling for Terrence Edwards, and then they started falling, and that's something that I think I'm trying to really remind myself, regardless of what the Pat Kelsey era looks like here at Louisville, big picture. And we can talk about the 30,000 foot scope, but I know we're reacting to the game against Wake. But man, like this team defensively, because you see all the shiny toys from, Rain Smith drilling threes and Terrence Edwards, who has the quietest stat lines ever. But even though he kind of like just, dang, he was leading scorer of that. Man, like I'm really trying to be present and appreciate just the eliteness that Chucky Hepburn has been doing this season because like you only got 1 year of him. And like I said, he doesn't grow on trees from that. And even when the ball wasn't falling, the ultimate glue guy, man,
Yeah.
Javon Hadley, like he gets to these spots. And it's the one thing, even after the EQ scare and some of the other games out there, I'm like, he's getting really good position. The shots aren't just falling. And Pat Kelsey said as much with Bob post game. Like they're doing a lot of good things. I'm not worried about the shots. He's like, the shots will fall. Like I'm, and to his credit, that the coaching staff has been consistent about that. So, man, all in all, everyone thought the sky was falling after Case and Pryor and Johnson going out, but man, they've just found a way. And regardless of what you think about the ACC and where it is in the hierarchy of Power Five, it's pretty remarkable to see what they've been able to do with some hurdles along the way.
Absolutely. I mean, they've been, just have Torvik pulled up since the win streak started December 21st. Louisville's the 12th best team in the country in terms of
Crazy.
efficiency, top 10 offense, and a top 45 defense to boot with it. Like they've been a really, really good per possession basketball team. And for me, it all starts, as you said, with Chucky Hepburn. I mean, I've been going on about it on Twitter. I pitched Doster about it on the podcast last week, but the dude should be a first team All-American. There's
Really
a
agree.
lot of really great guards in college basketball. Braden Smith's been fantastic. Cam Jones is probably a top 2, 3 player in the sport. There's Mark Sears has really come on, even though he kind of had the weird thing with LSU. But to me, there's not a dude that impacts the game on both sides of the ball the way Chucky Hepburn it does night in, night out. to where he's taking Hunter Salas, the leading scorer, and taking him out of the game. And on the other end of the ball, he's following up a 16 assist game with an 8 assist game, 5 of them in the first 10 minutes of the contest. Oh, and he scores and he rebounds. He does everything you would ever want from a guard, to where he has been absolutely spectacular. Louisville's needed him to be that with really their two other big guys that you would think were going to initialize offense early in the season. Gordon Johnson, Case and Pryor, both out for the year. Yes, Edwards and Hadley have really picked up the slack in that department. Even when Edwards' shot isn't falling, he hasn't let that impact the other aspects of his game, especially on the defensive end, but also rebounding and passing the ball, doing all those things. He's not consumed the fact that he's missing shots, was really impressive as well. But it all comes back to Chucky Hepburn. You mentioned something with Rain Smith too. I mean, obviously he's been absolutely electric shooting the ball. And even in a game where, as you said, they were sticking to him, he ends up going 4 of 10 from three. He still gets those 10 looks. But because Rain Smith is taking so much of the attention of other teams, it frees up other things. I mean, you look at early on in the game, it was Louisville's like second or third basket, something like that. They had a play where they had James Scott set screens for 2 curlers, and then Rain Smith set a batch screen for Scott to cut to the basket. Rain Smith flares out after setting that screen. That's something that Louisville's done a lot, screen for the screener type stuff to free up Rain Smith. Wake Forest very aware that both guys dart out towards Smith. Efton Reed had switched on one of the first screens Scott had set, so he's staying at the top of the key. No one's around him. Chucky with a great cross court lob pass to Scott that takes a top of the line point guard be able to make that pass. And that's just one, great stuff from Pat Kelsey. Two, because of how Rain Smith's been shooting the ball, you got to pay attention to him. And three, Scott is an elite rim finisher, and he's doing all the dirty work to set himself up to that dive for the basket to complete the play. And there's just so much stuff. That's just one possession, man. It's so much stuff that they're running on the offensive end to free up so many different looks. You just can't take everything away with the way the Cardinals are shooting the ball as well.
Well, and Bob and Paul talked about it. I appreciate the shout out they gave me on the broadcast. I honestly think it was Bob's idea, but he gave me credit for it, so I'm going to take it and run with it. But we essentially
always take the shout out.
Look. But it was essentially, I said it's whack-a-mole. Like the game when you don't know who's going to be the point person. Okay, Wake Forest made it a priority that Rain Smith was not going to get hot at the beginning of that game. But that possession you just alluded to, and I think if I recall correctly, Steve Forbes lost his mind after that because, and especially when Rain Smith started getting going on that. So look, man, it's just a balanced team. And although I had concerns of if the injury was going to be a snowball effect after the EKU scare and the Noah Waterman putback, man, like you can just tell, like Dieter always says on our airwaves, you can just see it. And man, even when the shots weren't falling, you could see it, like the cutting, the curling. And again, I'm not here to predict, are they going to go to the Final Four or win national championship this year? But the stark differences from the years past when people were being gaslit and say, like, we just need a confident idea of and game plan. This is all they were asking for. I mean, it's rare, but seeing Rain Smith, who got his pocket picked one time at diving for the basketball after. It's little things like that. I know you get in between the weeds when it talks about going to, Pat Kelsey's kids. That's been a hot topic around here. Just like, dude, no, who expects them to go to their kids' grade school basketball game but people here eat that up. And it just felt so removed from that. And to kind of expound on, the Ty-Laur Johnson fast break where he lost it, the amount of
I saw that watching it back on Wednesday. I was like, oh man.
The spirit. You don't watch movies, but this is right. This is tailor made for you to watch it along with. I didn't steer you wrong. It's not in the aura of Blue Chips, but there's a movie called The Sixth Man where I believe. Have you seen this?
I have seen this. That's the one where the guy that's really good at basketball dies and like his brother takes his place.
Right.
Yes.
I immediately thought of the spirit of Kenny Payne on that fast break of Ty-Laur Johnson. Oh, that is still lingering around the KFC Yub Center for that. So that's where I went again, not in the same realm of Blue Chips at all, but just a silly basketball movie that, captured our hearts in the mid-90s that I'm shocked that you watched because I know
the only reason is I have a cousin. It's the one from my radio days. My cousin who's a rabbi. He's a very big movie guy. He's a very big basketball guy. So he showed me that when I was younger. So that's where that comes from.
I imagine a young Jack Grossman finishing up Hebrew school. It's like, let's watch The Sixth Man. Prepping for your bar mitzvah. That's perfect right there. But again, to your point, man, I'm really just trying to be present and appreciate the greatness that Chucky Hepburn has been this season. And again, I go back to I can't recall maybe Peyton Siva. I mean, Quentin Snyder had some solid years there, but I mean, he's getting up in elite realm of just the record books, as is Rain Smith. That's why I was so frustrated. I kind of went scorched there. Thought our guy Doug Sherman, who I'm sure is a nice man, he didn't have the enthusiasm that I wanted him to have on the ACC network when Chucky Hepburn and Rain Smith were breaking records. I'm not saying you need to be Bob and Paul there, but I need a little bit more energy when you're breaking these records that haven't been broken in 20 freaking years.
Yeah, and I mentioned this last week, but I'll say it again. There is a little, very small part of me that's like, damn, that was Francisco Garcia's record against Murray State in 2004. I was at that game. Or like, that was Taekwondo. That was my childhood, man. They're ripping my childhood out of the history books.
And you only get them for 1 year. So it's like,
yeah.
This is what Kentucky fans felt like with the would have done. All that. But yeah, it's like, sure, Chucky didn't go to the Wisconsin Community College for this extra year or something. No, but look, like we said, man, it's just been a leader performance. And make no mistake about it. Like, regardless of what the final score was with the Wake Forest in the final 5 to 8 minutes or whatever it was, where they kind of took the foot off the gas, it was an absolute beatdown to a team that was very desperate to kind of solidify its stance in the ACC standings and, maybe make a case for the NCAA tournament. So I think it speaks volumes of just kind of, it's a business-like approach this team takes night in and night out. And I know that sounds cliche, but man, it has been really, really rewarding and fun to watch.
It has been. I mean, like you said, that Wake Forest team was desperate for quad one wins, especially because they were looking at this stretch, Duke at home at Louisville. Those were their two biggest chances the rest of the season to really prove a point and say, we belong in the NCAA tournament. How do you overcome, being 71st in the net or whatever it is? You have to have really good wins. And there's not a lot of chances for that in the ACC. And this week was their chance. And unfortunately for them, they kind of blew the Duke game. I think that's probably unfair because Duke's a phenomenal team, maybe the best team in the country, but they couldn't finish the Duke game. And then they come in and Louisville just absolutely blitzes them. So that's on the C4.
And they looked the part too, man. Like, they had some bigs on that team where I'm just like, and we can talk about the technical as how, like, that was a weak call. However, I hated it. I understand as why they called it, but I still hated it. I've seen so many things that have been said between the cracks during games. I'm like, that's what you get a technical for. It's a passionate dunk. Again, you can talk about how they were down 25 or 27 at the time when he got it. That's a different discussion.
It's the Chris Paul meme, the big three to cut the lead to 42.
Right. But I mean, that feels like a team, again, regardless of the breakdown, that you could see shock some teams in the conference tournament if they, keep their head on straight.
Yeah, I mean, they're a really talented team. C. Forbes, I do think, is a good coach, but at some point he does need to make an NCAA tournament to really justify that, because we've been doing this dance now for 3-4 years with him. And this doesn't look like a team that's going to make the NCAA tournament, just looking at the metrics in the resume right now. But that's still a game with a lot of the talent on the roster, a team that was playing really well before that Duke game. For Louisville to blow them away, that's a huge deal. And they had the game plan. They executed the game plan. It's the little things. I mean, you mentioned with Rain Smith diving for the ball. How about a guy like Connie Roots, who's been able to take advantage of the injuries to get an actual amount of playing time and roll in the game? I know on the stat sheet he didn't score a lot today like he did in the SMU game.
But when there was a lid on the rim, man, he hit a big three to kind of open it up.
That's exactly what I was going to bring up. I mean,
make no mistake about it.
It wasn't just him hitting the three either. It started on the defensive end of the floor where he tips a 3-point shot. Like, he closes out and gets a piece of a shot to where, maybe that three goes in and it's a 9-6 ball game. You don't know. Wake Forest can shoot the ball a little bit, but instead he tips it. Hepburn grabs the loose ball, pushes it forward to Hadley on like a cross-court pass, and then Hadley touch passes out to Roots, who hustles down, hits a corner for three. At that point, it's 12-7. That caps a 7-0 run, and that was the first, they said, a little bit of distance that was created there, and that was all Connie Roots on that, and also the pace and space that Louisville likes to play with as well. But Louisville in this game had 3 different runs in the first half, Phil. They had a 7-0 run, a 12-0 run, and another 7-0 run. Like, you don't see that very often in a first half where you have 3 different, I know the kill shot's technically a 10-0 run. I kind of look at a run being 3 possessions or more. But so 3 different legitimate runs, including a kill shot, in less than really 15 minutes of game time. You don't see that often. Like that's insane to do. Again, especially against a good team that's been the second best defensive team after Duke in the ACC this year.
Well, and two, I know it was circulating out on Twitter as well, but I believe Javon Hadley got trapped maybe on the baseline where it looked like he had a layup there, kicks it out to Raiden Smith, maybe one of the first ones he probably got a really good look at it. And collectively, you just saw before even he made the pass that he was open, you just see the masses of Louisville fans standing up because they know how elite of a shooter he is. And man, like I said about Chucky Hepburn, the same goes for Raiden Smith. Those guys do not grow on trees. And I'm guilty of this too, man. As somebody who helped out with the McDonald's All-American game that was here in Louisville back in 2007 or 8, I can't remember what it was. Man, these guys, like so many times we get caught up in stars. And look, I understand with the recruitment of Michael Brown, it sends a message to the sport of like where you are in the hierarchy. Make no mistake about it. But there are some guys that come from College of Charleston, Long Beach State with the Boubacar Traore, who provides a spring and maybe doesn't show up in the stat line in terms of what he's able to get, but get some elite rebounds and kind of help solidify with the absence of Case and Pryor. Colorado, not a powerhouse, but Javon Hadley, some tournament success there. You know what you're getting from Chucky Hepburn. But I try to tell myself and remind myself, Terrence Edwards, obviously, from James Madison. There's some guys that get lost in the cracks that are elite talents at the college level. And I think this is a perfect case study of, Pat Kelsey was in the running for, I remember some big time names in Louisville basketball beat up there. And you're kind of seeing what's going on as an IU fan with Balo up there and just, the highest payroll that they have up there. It doesn't always equate to success. And I don't know what it's going to be a year from now. I don't know what it's going to be 2 to 4 years from now. However, he has made it adamant that he's getting guys that fit his culture and understand what they are trying to do. And Strebel and our buddy Jeff Lightsey had a really good conversation yesterday reacting to this. And you're seeing it right now at Arkansas too. Like you got the shiny toys that you thought and it's just not plug and play. Whereas Chucky Hepburn sat down with Paul Rogers on the coach's show when he was out recruiting some big time names that Louisville's apparently in the running for. And basically it's like, it's no disrespect to Wisconsin and Coach Gar, what they did there. But man, I wanted a place, my dad and I wanted a place where I could play fast pace. We could do those things. So kudos to Chucky Hepburn, understanding and studying kind of Pat Kelsey stuff, even at a smaller level, but just how he was going to be utilized and not just the John Calipari method of thinking of like, okay, he's got a bunch of guys in the NBA. That's automatically going to be me because of the Cal effect. And it's as much as it is about the money and getting yours while you're in college, it's also about the right fit because that's going to correlate down the road as well wherever you play professionally.
Absolutely. When you look at the transfer portal rankings are a very fickle thing. Yeah, they always are. It's a little bit like recruiting in that sense, but it's not always the top guys that make the biggest impacts. This year, obviously, Chucky, as we've been talking about, but about last year, Dalton Connect. He was a highly rated transfer, probably like a top 15, 20 transfer, but he wasn't viewed as a dude that was going to be runner-up to Zach Edey in the National Player of the Year voting and drag Tennessee to an Elite Eight. Hey, you think about Marcus Damask at Illinois. He was a complete unknown. Lance Jones was a dude at Purdue who really, to me, that was the biggest difference between them losing to a 16 seed 2 years ago and being in the national title game last year. Your Lance Jones being a guy that could space the floor, be a 3-and-D guy, really defend the best guard on the perimeter, playing a role, knowing the role he needs to play. I think Pat Kelsey has aced that this year. Now he's got to do it again next year, because I know Michael Brown's coming in and the recruiting's going really well now. But this is a year after year thing, and that's questions for the offseason that, quite frankly, I don't really care about right now because the current team's won 10 in a row. But right. But you're looking at it and you say, okay, he built this team perfectly. And yes, it's nice to get a guy that's highly rated, and if you pay him, and Umar Bal is a dude I never really thought fit what Louisville was trying to do anyways. I thought maybe like a Coleman Hawkins or a Great Osibor would have been better fits for what Pat Kelsey's trying to do. That being said, Kansas State, Washington aren't exactly having great years with those guys either. And James Scott's really emerged throughout these last 6 to 8 weeks to where it hasn't really mattered that they didn't get those guys. But there's a lot of different ways to win in college basketball, and whether that be both how you recruit, how you bring in transfers, or style of play as well. You can win like Pat Kelsey and Mark Pope have been doing, or you can, be Calvin Sampson and just grind your ass out for 40 minutes, or the case on Saturday in Fog Allen Fieldhouse, 50 minutes, and really just suffocate you defensively. And that's really what makes college basketball, to me, a lot different than the NBA, where everyone has embraced already the three-point revolution, because in college basketball, not everyone can shoot like that. not every team is able to pull that off in a way that like Louisville and Kentucky have, for instance, this year, to where you get so many different styles. There are a lot of different ways to win. Heck, Marquette, Shaka Smart, they don't bring anyone in the transfer portal. They home grow everything, the old fashioned way. And that has worked wonderfully for him up in Milwaukee. To
Well,
where, yeah.
no, I'm sorry. And one of the things, real quick, on to piggyback off that, that was the thing for discussion over the summer. We had CL Brown on yesterday, the Courier Journal, kind of reacting to that. And it's like, the questions that has Pat Kelsey surpassed any sort of expectation that he had? And he's like, in the first year, yes, absolutely. Now the conversation, and as you alluded to, somebody like Mark Pope and Pat Kelsey, they'll at jobs like this, those have, you're seeing it right now with Mike Woodson. At some point, you need to see ROI and return on investment of what you're trying to do. You're building towards something. But I mean, for what this year was, or is, I should say, to where it was last year, is nothing short of remarkable. And you're seeing it. And I don't want to get into the attendance numbers. The crowds have been great at the KFC games. Are they what it was the national championship year? No. However, I think you are seeing more and more. It's because the small sample size I have is that we get hit up occasionally. Do people have tickets for that? Last year, we couldn't give away tickets, like even for, and now it's just like Drew's like, stop asking, like, because it's something of like, yeah, this is how we have to kind of retrain our minds of like, yes, this is Louisville basketball. This is a hot ticket. This is a fun product out there. This is worthy of your time. I just got off a call where somebody was like, man, it was burdensome the last couple of years, but I felt obligated to watch the games because of the core memories essentially I had with my grandpa and father of watching these games. And you hate watched it because you felt like there's this emotional connection to you, and it's like, okay, when you figure it out, it's going to make that all the more worth it. So man, all in all, big win against Wake Forest. I know they got a tough one. I say tough one tongue in cheek, coming up against the ATL. Since you're going to be in attendance, we'll call it a tough one, just so you get
I'm excited for it, man. Like I haven't seen them in person this year. So I haven't seen them in person during the Pat Kelsey era. So I'm very excited to see them down here in Atlanta. I do. There's like, for full disclosure, there's a group of like 9, 10 people coming in, including my dad and my brother. So I'm gonna have myself a weekend pretty much.
Attaboy, Grossman Palooza.
Yep. I'm curious. I wonder if Southeast Christian is sending the buses down.
CL was it CL? I'm trying to remember. Somebody brought it up on our airwaves. That's terrible. I should know that. Talking about bringing it up there. We've had a couple callers. I think it was on with Ennis talking about that. By the way, Ennis and Luke, right the night before or the day of the Wake Forest game, had Wes Durham on. And as much as I said, I wish the former ACC colleague network had a little more umph when Chucky Hepburn and Rain Smith are great. Wes Durham's perfect for the ACC network. He's got that like Southern twang.
He got the Southern drawl.
I mean, I'm like, this is how I know. He said he hadn't been to Louisville in like 2 years. And in terms of like, he's called Louisville games, but he hasn't been in Louisville. And it's like, okay, now nature is healing. Wes Durham's on it. I am the biggest Wes Durham fan. He's up there with like Shelby. Actually, when I was driving back from vacation, I got stuck in Atlanta traffic, and he was doing
I'm sorry.
Falcon. Yeah, I know. It's like eight lanes of that. But he was doing it at a Falcons preseason game, and I'm like, oh, this is Wes Durham. I love this. And just listening to him, but it feels like big time ACC basketball when Wes Durham is on a call.
It does. But I'll say this because I remember I went the last time Louisville played down here at Georgia Tech was 2 years ago, the 4-28 year. Yeah. And I went to the game because I was like, Louisville's in town. I'm not working today. Tickets are $3. Let's go. Why the hell not? And they did bring Southeast Christian did bring all the buses down because I think, to be completely honest, people probably purchased the tickets preseason before.
Right.
They found out what the team was. And I don't know if I've ever been in a more awkward building because Georgia Tech, that was Pastner's last year, and they were really bad. Also, not 4-28 bad, but they won like maybe 10 games on the year. So there weren't any Georgia Tech fans there. And there's Louisville, who was probably like 4-22 at that point. And there were 3,000 people there, and probably about 1,800 of them were Louisville fans. And it was one of the weirder things I had been at in a game. But it's great to see how far Louisville's come since then. But just the only thing I'll say on attendance, we haven't talked about it much on the podcast, just because I kind of don't get caught up in that much of stuff.
Good. But you'll be healthier not doing it. It hurts your mind talking about it. I feel dumber even bringing it up.
The one thing I'll say is, I think what's happened, it's an uncomfortable conversation probably for Louisville fans. When you have all the, the stripper scandal, the NCAA allegations, the black eye in the program for so long, and then you follow that up with COVID, and then 3 years of 13 wins, 4 wins, 8 wins. Louisville isn't going to like this, but interest in the program is going to be at an all-time low. That's just what it's going to be. And yes, Pat Kelsey has done a phenomenal job re-energizing everything from the get-go when he got hired, but it's still going to take time. You don't just rebuild that overnight when it's not like a 1 year thing. This has been in one way or another affecting Louisville for close to a decade at this point.
Oh,
It takes time for that to build back up, but we're seeing it to where they had like 18,000
which is
for
better
a
than
couple of years ago. Yeah,
90% of the rest of the sport. Like that. And again, to get back to where it's at, Ethan Moore, a buddy who does the Coors Light postgame show at ESPN Louisville, he talked about interest that his daughters have. Again, small sample size, but I think it's indicative of just kind of the overall culture of where we are at this juncture of just, fandom in 2025. He said 2 years prior, he's like, Louisville play today. But now they're excited, and you saw on Twitter that his daughters are going there getting autographs now, and they don't want to miss a game. So I think that's kind of the snowball effect when if it's worthy of your time and the players look like they are engaged, the coaching staff looks like it's engaged, the product on the court, even sometimes in a losing effort, hadn't happened in 10 games, but when their effort is there, people can live with some of the results there. They don't got to be happy with it, but they're like, well, sometimes, like Bob says, it's the other guy's movie. You're just in it. And
yeah,
maybe that was the Duke night, but it's getting back to that. And it just, Blankenbaker's put out the attendance numbers of it's gone up in small doses each month. And I think it'll keep doing that the remainder of the year as they're trending toward a possible conference championship run into with Duke, maybe the ACC tournament and where they're going to be seated in March.
yeah, and we've talked a lot about where they're going to be seated in March, and I think that's an interesting conversation as well, obviously. But that's just a buzzword for me. I love that type of stuff, but I do think, when Louisville is a city school, the fan base is the city. It's not, like Kentucky or Indiana where you have, all the yahoos from the farms across the state coming in for every game. It does take time, I think, to really build that back up. And that's going to be something that has already, as we've seen this year, started to do. It just takes time, I think. Even with how good the team's been. But I do want to say this, because it feels like both in terms of how the team's constructed, a little bit how they play, and just how they've exceeded expectations. I know it's two very different eras because of, what Louisville was in the Petito era and what being bad felt like in the Petito era, coming off like an 8-9 game the year before. But it feels a lot like the bridge year to me, the
I said
2011
I'm
team.
so
Yeah.
happy you said I
Yeah.
said that yesterday. I don't know if you were listening, but I said the same when people said where it is on the hierarchy of it. I said, yeah, it feels like that Preston Knowles, even though they lost in the opening round against
Yeah.
Moorhead State and Kenneth Fareed, I said that the people you talk about to this day, I mean, outside of some of the Final Four and championship teams, people love that team because I don't know if it was the bar was set so low with Patino indicating that it was going to be a bridge year, but just the effort that you got from those guys night in and night out. I said the exact same thing. I'm so happy we're on the same page with
Yes.
that.
Oh no, I'm right there with you, and I will give you credit for that. I didn't realize you had that
No,
take
no, I,
yesterday,
I
but
I like it better
yeah.
that we hadn't talked or you hadn't heard that that we were in sync on that. No, that makes me happy.
Yeah, but the way they play, the way that team was very revolutionary. Playing Cal Kirk at the 4 at the time was like, oh my God, you're playing with all this shooting, you're going so small. And it worked for that team. It really worked for that team, and just exceeding the expectations, the excitement of it. That I believe that was the first year of the Yum Center. Also, there was the Miracle on Main was kind of the signature moment for that team. That big comeback against Marquette, but it just seems like a very similar vibe. I know it didn't end the way fans would have won with the Morehead State game. Preston Knowles spraining his ankle, but that was a team that was in the Big East tournament final, playing against the Kemba Walker UConn team, taking them down the wire in a one possession game. That that UConn team ended up winning the title. That was a damn good team. That was a fun team, but it just very similar vibes for me
Yeah,
between
no,
those two
I
teams.
completely agree, and it's funny because it's like as we inch closer to March, it's like I understand people are saying that, and I'm guilty of this too because I talk about my core memories in high school or cutting school and walking down with like 15 of us down Meadow Drive to Bardstown Road to the Mr. Gaddy's and just watching college, and all of us saying like we know we're going to get ISAP in detention, but
Doesn't
like
matter.
we'll live with the results. But I say this is like, oh, the bridge year, regardless of what the outcome was. I'll say this: the more and more I say that out loud, it's like, yeah, maybe not be the first game of the tournament and lose because I remember that feeling and just how was that in Denver I want to say it was in Denver or something like that. I want to say the Pepsi Center.
I'll have to look up
Wait,
where the game was.
but I was like, this is terrible. I was like, it's great. This season's going great, but it's like everyone says, well, regardless of what happens in the postseason, I'm like, maybe just don't be the first game and lose in the first game. Was the one caveat.
Yeah, the first game hasn't been kind to Louisville in the tournament.
Yeah,
That was the Chris Mack's first year against
Richard
Minnesota
Pitino,
too. Yeah, Richard Pitino.
So yeah, no, but no, look, I think talking about quad one, quad two, when talking about bracketology and projections, this is why you got into the business versus kind of talking about the coaching changes, who's wearing tights, things like that, making a mockery of these alleged fights that are happening between a player and a coach and sitting in the stands and an athletic piece from that. So just
is he actually kicked off the team? Is he not? Is he in the transfer portal?
Two different press releases going out. Like it was just when you look back on it and you see this. And just listening to Bob and Paul, that's you know what, that's my indicator and measuring. The joy and cadence of their voice of listening to Bobby V and Paul Rogers on our overall 93 down the Ville and ESPN Louisville app. It's night and day of listening to it's like Bob said multiple times, like, look, I've been on the Final Four teams, I've been calling some of these champions. He's like, and Paul said the same. He's like, this may be one of my favorite. Maybe it's recency bias, maybe it's just polar opposites of what it's been, but they are having the time of their life, and it showcases on the broadcast.
Well, I'll say this. I mean, there's nothing as a sports fan, like obviously the championships, the Final Fours, the playoff runs, postseason runs are all spectacular what you do it for, but there's nothing that matches the feeling of when you're not supposed to be very good and then you are really good. I mean, obviously Louisville this year, the bridge year is kind of a similar comp to that. I know, I went through that with Indiana football this year, but like I won't use that because I know people get tired of that around there. But I'll use I'm a Chicago Cubs fan, and obviously they won the World Series in 2016, and that's the core memory and all that stuff. I would argue like that was fun. Don't get me wrong; it was incredible, once in a lifetime for me. But I might have had more pure fun in 2015 when they burst on the scene and won 97 games and beat St. Louis in the NLDS, end up getting swept by the Mets. That just when you have the expectation, it's fun, but it almost feels like more of a relief than when you win as a sports fan than when you come out and you're just happy to be here. You're on a run, the team's hot, and it feels like they can do no wrong. There's no scrutiny with it. You can just be happy and enjoy it and just have it's sports fandom at its purest. You can't have that every year because there are going to be expectations moving forward. That's how this goes. It takes a special circumstance like Louisville having the three worst seasons it's had ever, or the Cubs in this case being, having a 108-year title drought and losing 90 plus games for 4 straight years before that 2015 season. But really, it's a special type of season.
It makes you appreciate it more. Like, I mean, honestly, that's what that's why I opened the podcast talking about with Chucky Hepburn and Reed Smith. If you're just a basketball, I don't care if you're a Louisville fan, if you hate Louisville, if you can't appreciate what Chucky Hepburn's doing defensively and what Reed Smith is doing shooting the ball, you don't like the sport of basketball. Like I'm sorry, like Reed Smith, his ability to shoot that ball at an elite level as just a basketball fan, like knowing that it's probably at a high clip it is going to go in or go halfway down. Like it's must watch TV if you're a basketball fan. Yeah. And I'm trying to be extremely present and enjoy it versus the direct that you've seen the last couple of years.
Well, let's do this before we get out of here. There is one other thing I want to hit on with you. So first of all, like the other big game, and there was just something that felt right of like 7:00 Tuesday, the two games you have on, Louisville game and Kentucky game. I hated they were at the same time slot. I hate that ESPN keeps putting them at the same time slot. But there was something like, okay, all's right with the world. Louisville blows out Wake Forest, huge win. Kentucky upsets a top 10 Tennessee team without Lamont Butler, without Andrew Carr. Just the amount of chestiness from both fan bases. It felt like the rivalry. Again, like that's how it's supposed to be. Just both teams going at each other. Louisville going, yeah. Tennessee can't shoot the ball. Kentucky, you guys haven't beat anyone. Just the back and forth. Like that was a lot of fun. But I bring that up, or first, I'd like you to react to if you have any thoughts on that side of it as well. But I have a point that I'm going farther than that with it.
No, too. I mean, like it was a fun game to watch. I appreciated you talking about this with Doster because I'm like you. It's like I have both on, but it's like I'm paying more attention to one than the other, and then I go
Yeah.
back and watch it just because it's not like the NFL red zone for me. It's like if I'm watching a game, especially if like we're going to talk about it, it's like I want to be locked in. It's fine for March Madness if it's not your team and there's a plethora of games going on, but if you're like going to react to this Louisville Wake game, like my attention, I would say 99.9% of that was on that game and then going back and watching. But no, a massive win down there. Went back and watched it. It got a little dicey at the end for
Yeah.
Kentucky, but all in all,
Tennessee, quite literally, they were 13 of 41 on uncontested shots.
I saw
Like,
this
that's
stat.
crazy.
Just the amount of threes that they shot. But no, I mean, like it was a fun game down there if you're a basketball fan, and obviously as depleted as they were with injuries, tough to get one out of there.
Yeah. But I think there's an angle of something that's happening this weekend that I don't know. It might have been discussed on the station. If it has, please tell me. And that we're just retreading something,
New
but something
audience,
that
you're
I
good.
haven't heard. Yeah. But Kentucky, as we know, is hosting John Calipari, Kenny Payne in Arkansas this weekend. And there's been obviously the Seth Greenberg stuff that we don't need to get into about College Gameday and all that. I think it's ludicrous that they're just defaulting to Duke Carolina. But you guys know my thoughts. I was on with Streetball. I went on a long rant about that. We don't need to repeat that. But the angle I want to talk about is there's been so much discussion of will Calipari get booed? Will he get cheered? Will he be accepted? All that stuff. I want to look at how does the Louisville fan consume this Kentucky Arkansas game? Do they? Because on one hand, obviously it's Kentucky, it's the chief rival, it's the history and all that stuff. But and it would be absolutely hilarious if the former coach came in and won the game, to be completely honest. But on the other end, you have not just the whole Kenny Payne angle, which is obviously a very big angle with what happened the last 2 years at Louisville, but you have John Calipari. He was the face of the evil empire for 15 years. And the dude is, as much as people, hate Kentucky and all that stuff, John Calipari, for, people, especially my age growing up, was just so synonymous with Kentucky that that I feel like people hated Calipari more as much, if not more, than they hated Kentucky. And it was the way Cal irked Louisville fans and the way, he won the games, to be completely honest, and just the swagger and all that stuff, to where I think there's going to be a chunk of Louisville fans that I don't want to say wants Kentucky to win because Louisville never wants Kentucky to win, but I think it's a very interesting dynamic of, do you want Kentucky to be embarrassed, or would it be funny to see the head of the evil empire come back with Kenny Payne, and have both of them get killed, which is a much more likely result of how bad Arkansas has been, by the way, and have to go, tails tucked between their legs going back to Fayetteville?
Yeah, that's interesting because I know Blankenbaker talked about this a little bit of like the conflicting minds of how you approach that. Because of one breath, it's like, okay, you guys got what you want. Again, I'm going to keep giving kudos to C.L. Brown and when he talked about this yesterday, because it was a different approach that I hadn't viewed, because I've always kind of viewed it through the scope of like either they're going to boo him or they're going to cheer him. And C.L. Brown's like, I think they're going to be kind of apathetic to him. Like it's like they appreciate the time that they had there, and there's some core memories, which is a bizarre thing. But maybe, and Mark Pope had a great answer, I think, from the UK Sports Network on his coach's show last night. Basically, he's like, look, I mean, it's awkward right now, and that's the one thing I'll say about Mark and Pat Kelsey for that. Like through all the coach speaky stuff out there, they both give some very thought provoking answers where it's like it's not just getting the message out that they want. Like, I know that's kind of tongue firmly in cheek because there's a lot of times like Pat Kelsey will just default to the power of the unit and I'm building the best culture. But when they get past that, they both kind of give very thoughtful answers. And Mark Pope, I thought it was a great answer, just saying it's awkward right now, but we hope that, he will be back here in the near future, maybe when it's not as awkward, and he will be celebrated the way he should. And he's been great to me. So it's a different approach with, look, I mean, you've worked in this business long enough. There's a lot of fragile egos out there. I think he's comfortable enough in his own shoes. But look, I'm not going to tell you how to fan Kentucky fans, but just know like the amount of Final Fours John Calipari took you to, the championship game, the fact that something that kind of goes under the radar, which I know Dan Issel loathed, but I still think helps the overall brand of that. The fact that Anthony Davis, Devin Booker still wearing Kentucky, starter jackets when they walk to their NBA game. That matters to a up and coming high school recruit that may still be considering, because it's still cool to do that. So he did a lot for him. In terms of the Louisville component, that is a fascinating question, because they hate Kenny Pade's performance here so
Yeah.
much that that's going to be kind of the hate watch component of it, I would say. And a lot of those recruits that were on the team were in the running to be with Louisville, but I know that really doesn't matter as much with the transfer portal. So I think Louisville fans will hate watch it. And who do they want to win? I would say they like Mark Pope way more than they thought they would. But it's still Kentucky. But man,
It's a great question.
It's like gun to your head. I honestly don't know. I would say, yeah, the Kenny Payne stuff matters a ton, and John Calipari.
I think they want Calipari and Kenny Payne to get killed.
Man, I'm kind of leaning that way a little bit. It's still Kentucky, though.
Yeah, I know. That's the thing.
Yeah, that's a good question. So, man, regardless, they're going to hate watch it. And I'll say this in terms of the Carolina Duke thing and decision with that. I'll play devil's advocate just because I know you were in the fishbowl of just consuming college basketball so much, and I'm with you. You had another opportunity to play that game. But I think in terms of just the attention in a Pro Bowl weekend, the mind's already kind of trained to start getting recalibrated from football to college basketball for the rest of the country, not here locally and in the region and guys like you, but Carolina and Duke, you could be on cruise control and still get a massive number. I fundamentally disagree with it, but I'm just talking from the programming side. It's a layup for them to just kind of knock it out of the park, even though the Shakespearean component of Calipari returning to Rupp would have been much better in my eyes too. That's the reason they probably did it.
It's lazy is what it is.
Oh, absolutely. No, look, I'm not I'm just saying this is why they did it.
No, I understand why they're doing it. I just think it's wrong. And I honestly, like, with how bad Arkansas has been, I think if I was choosing it, I probably would have gone to Tennessee, Florida, to be completely honest. Like,
Bobby
that's
V
a
on
top
that
10 game. Yeah. Oh man, I'm not gonna see him in Atlanta then. That sucks. But Bobby V's got a great one there. That'll be a really fun game. But I would have gone to that game. I would have gone to, Marquette, UConn would have been a really good game to go to. You have those two games are the two best games of the weekend, plus all the storylines in Kentucky. You don't have to go to Duke, North Carolina every single time.
Well, especially when it's going to be there at the end of the year too. Maybe you just want the eyes of Cameron and the Cameron crazies in the background, but it's like, guys, life will go on. Like, it's not a big life will go on if you go there. I agree with you.
But here's the thing, ESPN's college football coverage, I have a lot of issues with, and we don't need to get into that right now. But one thing they do really well on the College Gameday side is that they don't just lazily default to, well, this is the game that, is the 8:00 ABC game. That's the two name brands. We have to go to this one. They didn't go to Auburn, Alabama this year. They didn't. I don't even think they went to Ohio State, Michigan this year.
I think for when they played each other, I think
right. They went to Texas A&M
right,
because that was the biggest game of the day. That was the one of the most influence. They do things like go to James Madison, or like they went to freaking Indiana this year for what wasn't a great game of Indiana Washington. It wasn't a hyped game, but that was the bigger story. Like they will go to games that is not just the Kansas has Texas coming in, so we got to go to that. Kentucky has Tennessee in, and this isn't what it was this year. This was the SEC of old, and we got to make our trip to Rupp this year. We got to do Duke Carolina twice, even though we're only having 5 live shows this year because the football playoff goes to January 21st. It's just at some point, guys, ESPN has so much inventory for college basketball between the SEC, the ACC, the Big 12, which, by the way, the SEC might be the best conference of all time this year. And the Big 12 has had this historic run of being a great basketball conference year in, year out. You don't have to go to Duke, North Carolina, guys. It's a slap in the face. And if you're trying to grow the game, grow the product, which ESPN, I would think, would want to do because of how much damn time they dedicate to airing these games, it's not smart to go to Duke, Carolina when there's 3 better matchups that you could go to. And I get it, they wouldn't go to UConn and Marquette because that game's on Fox, and basketball never does that, whereas football is willing to do that on the game day side. But there's still 2 other games on your network that you could have done that would have been a much better way to try to introduce the fan to college basketball than, well, Cooper Flag's great. They're playing North Carolina. That's a great rivalry, but North Carolina is on the bubble, may not even make the NCAA tournament. The game's at Duke, and contrary to Jerry Bills' belief, the game does not always deliver. It has delivered a lot. They've played a lot of classics. Do not get me wrong, but let's not pretend that every single game the last 2-3 years has been a 1 point contest and ends on a buzzer beater.
Yeah, no, I think, look, I mean, so this is what it feels like. The ACC has a programming priority when it comes to basketball, like the SEC football. But no, I'm with you on that. Look, if I were in charge of the czar of college basketball with all this inventory you have on ESPN Plus, I would have a college basketball show dedicated, kind of like how they have college football final on that.
Right.
And
Well, but like
reacting to the
ESPN's shown they don't care about college basketball.
kind of like the fine folks over at Field of 68.
Yes.
How about that?
Yep.
So that's some of the things that like they could do to kind of enhance the sport and get away from just the brands. Like you alluded to, a team like Houston is a fun style to watch. Some names that aren't traditionally up there that you see that are on ESPN Plus. And I know you're kind of gravitating toward the paywall, and that's the relationship that the Big 12.
Right. And part of it is the Big 12 contract isn't very good with ESPN, but
right.
yeah.
And that's some of the news that came out this morning about the ACC relationship with ESPN. I saw our friend David Hale and Andrea Adelson tweet about that. So that's something for another discussion. But look, I think as the national audience begins to turn their attention to this sport out and in a bye week, essentially, unless you're football Freddy and want to watch the Pro Bowl and bet on that, good luck. This is where the masses will be beginning to turn a ton of their attention to college basketball, like from the outside of scope. I know you kind of had a couple Saturdays prior where there weren't NFL playoffs, but make no mistake about it. I mean, it's if you're trying to tip off your season in theory, Carolina and Duke is why they probably try. I disagree with it, but that's probably why they.
And you can still have Carolina and Duke on there, just like Alabama Auburn, even though that game was meaningless in terms of Auburn was really bad and Alabama just embarrassed itself the week before. That you can still have that as the 6 o'clock game and promote the hell out of it, just like ESPN did for the Iron Bowl this past year. But just because of that, you don't need to send every available resource there. There's more to the sport than just Duke, North Carolina, and I think ESPN forgets that. And I'm not blaming, like, even though I disagree with what Seth Greenberg said on the B show earlier this week, but it's not him or Reese Davis or Jay Bill is up on Duke Carolina, but it's not the people that are doing the actual commentating. It's coming from the higher ups is where this is coming from. So I'm not trying to personally take shots at, the broadcasters or that type of stuff. But at some point, if you want the product to be good, the people from ESPN have to promote it the right way. And they aren't doing that. If you're these conferences, I get it's just lumped in with the football, but I like, the Big 12, your Max kind of idea of let's package the basketball separately and have its own TV contracts. And I think, honestly, that might be the best way for them long-term moving forward. And we've gone kind of off topic here, and we'll wrap up in a sec. But that's something where I look at when you look at the sport itself, how do you market yourself better to where you're not just, yes, you're on ESPN, but they clearly don't value or care about the product. It's a very similar issue that what Major League Baseball has with ESPN as well. If you're not the NFL or you're not LeBron James, you're just not going to get talked about on that network.
Well, and there's so many times where there's college basketball games that should be the lead story, and I'm an NBA guy, but it's like, guys, come on, like there's some great games that should lead Sports Center, but that's a discussion for another day.
I would say SVP is one that he does a good job of that,
right?
Like, yeah, he's the outlier there. love good old SVP. He was on Field 68 after dark last night. I got
nice. Shout out. So, that's awesome.
Yeah, so shameless plug for the company, but
La Familia there. So okay, so you're going to the game down at ATL. The Grossman clan's coming down there, so you'll have. Is this journalism, Jack? Is you going to go in?
No,
okay,
this is full on fan Jack.
Attaboy,
This weekend we're going to be having fun. We got
good seats, or what's this? Looking like?
We're sitting 100 level.
Attaboy.
Yeah,
Kenny G open up the wallet for this one.
It's Georgia Tech tickets aren't exactly insanely in demand, but
no PSLs with those. No PSLs. You gotta make a massive donation for Mighty Mouse and Damon Stoudemire. Okay.
No, it's fine. I didn't get to actually go to the game because it's a different game because I was working that night. But they had a promotion going. They were giving you, when you bought tickets to the Louisville game, they gave you a free ticket to another game. Which
Kenny Payne effect.
Yeah. So And I like Damon Stoudemire. I think he's a really good coach. And they've been a little disappointing this year, but that's a team that showed last season, especially when they had Miles Kelly in that group. Like they beat Duke, Carolina, and Clemson at home. So like they can come up and play well for a game. So that's going to be one where Louisville's going to have to, avoid the trap games. That's the story for the
That's the
rest of the
message. Yeah,
regular season.
completely
Yeah.
agree. I mean, like you look at Ken Palm of just projections of what they're supposed to do and supposed to be the driver's seats, but I think Pat Kelsey is consistent from the standpoint, and I know Bob and Paul are in the bullpen talking about this right now of just the games that they're predicted to win, and Pat Kelsey just kind of staying on brand with the message of, hey, look. Next game, I don't even care about any of the games down the road. I just care about Georgia Tech. That's all I'm caring about right now. And I think he's speaking it into existence. Like we talked about the energy vampires from seasons prior. If you talk about how you're hurt and broken and all these things over and over again, guess what? You're going to believe it. Same thing on the other side with Pat Kelsey talking about the next game's the most important. And, diving on, people made fun of him diving on the court for loose balls and everything. You think that's correlating a little bit to style of play? So again, it's cheesy, it's corny. You may not like it, but I think it embodies kind of like the culture he keeps talking about he wants to create. My laptop is about to die here in a second, so you may need to wrap up.
I was about to wrap up anyways, Phil, but yeah, the last thing I'll note, Rick Pitino, calling Coppin State or wherever it was the greatest team ever every single time. You say it enough times, people start to believe it, whether it's actually true or not. And, but that's all we'll get out here before Phil's laptop dies. Appreciate you as always hopping on, Phil. Always a lot of
Of
fun.
course.
Coach Lieber and I planning on being back. I think Monday is the plan right now. We react to Louisville, Georgia Tech, and everything else. For Phil Baker, I'm Jack Grossman. This has been Floyd Street's Finest. We'll